Hey guys, what's up from Pokemon Classics, reminding you that the classics never go out of style. You know, the market's an incredibly volatile place right now for Pokemon, and some cards are shooting up to record high prices. Others are seeing a significant retrace just in the last month or so. And there's a lot of factors that go into the underlying Pokemon card industry. However, one of those factors that's most important is the one that we're going to be looking at today, and that factor is scarcity. And today I'm going to throw out there as a thesis that scarcity ultimately wins when it comes to card prices, card availability, just being able to find stuff. It's a numbers game, and the more educated you are, the more knowledge you have on the market trends, the population reports, the availability on e-commerce sites like eBay, Instagram, Facebook Marketplace, the more you equip yourself with the tools to be successful as a collector. Now, I just want to preface this. None of this is financial advice or collecting advice. I'm just a collector myself. I have a lot of experience, several decades in the Pokemon industry, and you can take this information and use it as you will, but I think there may be some universal rules here that apply to multiple different situations. So in honor of that, let's take a look at scarcity. So in my last video, we talked about three factors that are at work in the background of the market. Those three factors are rarity, scarcity, and condition. Today, though, out of these three factors, scarcity is the one that we can really research the most and influence the most in our purchasing, selling, buying decisions. It's the one factor of the market that has abundant data for it. If we're talking about scarcity and the importance, I think we saw this just in the last PWCC auction. The cost of a Charizard PSA 10, which I think is still a pretty safe investment if I'm being honest with you, is significantly higher than other cards out there like the Lugia. A PSA 10 first edition Lugia sold for an astounding price. This actually took me by surprise. I was not expecting a card to go for this much outside of first edition based Charizard. But it kind of makes sense. There's a population of 41 first edition PSA 10 Lugias out there on the market. As a result, it went for $129,000. On the other side, Charizard, you take the card that is synonymous with Pokemon card collecting, the most iconic card in the series, in the entire Pokemon world, sold for $16,000. That's a small fraction of the Lugia. Why is that? Well, it's because of scarcity. There are over 10 times as many, with a population of 435 copies out there. And even if we take a look at what's on eBay right at this moment, there are 12 different copies available that you could purchase at any given time on eBay, whether for auction or for a buy it now. However, if we take a look at the Lugia, there's 2 available, and one of those is listed at a ridiculous price, which suggests to me that it's really more of eye candy, that the seller is not interested in selling that card. So this seems pretty obvious to me that Lugia is just a more difficult card to find, and therefore the opportunity, the cost of opportunity, when are you going to have another chance to buy it, is one of those factors that comes into play. And we're going to see that across the board with a lot of different cards moving forward throughout this video. Case in point, let's take everybody's favorite difficult to grade card, Typhlosion 17 from Neo Genesis. Now, this is a card that as a set collector, I've been after for a number of years. I don't have one. They simply don't exist. But what we'll see about it is why it commands such a large price is a combination of 3 factors, and each of these 3 factors applies to every single card. What is the population of the card? The lower the population, the more desirable and the more competition that card's gonna find. What is the availability? How many of them are actually available to purchase at any given time? Obviously, there's only a few copies available. It's going to go for a higher price than if there's tens of copies or hundreds of copies of a similar card on the market. It's a supply and demand issue. Now, popularity is important because popularity is one of those factors that's going to influence prices. But so often I see a number of experts out there that seem to conflate popularity with population or with scarcity. Popularity is probably the least important of these 3 factors, as we'll see in a moment, but it certainly is a factor. The more popular the Pokemon, like a Charizard, like a Lugia, it's going to capture more attention, a wider audience, more collectors, and that'll also drive up the competition for that individual card. Now let's give you guys a concrete example to latch onto. Take these two Pokemon, Blastoise, an iconic Pokemon of the original series. He's cool. He's a turtle. Turtles win the race. That's what fables have taught us, right? Slow and steady wins. On the other hand, we have this ugly bug Pokemon, Yanma. Most people probably have never heard of Yanma. I mean, if you're talking with kids out on the street or going back to millennials who have left Pokemon for a long time, they're probably going to remember Blastoise. But are they going to remember Yanma? Probably not. It's not even cool looking. However, if we take a look at the prices of these cards, they are dramatically different from one another, and there's an explanation for that. The Blastoise recently went for $4,400. Now don't get me wrong, that is a great price. That's a lot of money, especially for an unlimited card. However, the Yanma went for $15,400. Why? Why would a card that's seemingly newer, seemingly less popular, seemingly less cool, if we're being honest with ourselves, go for over triple the price of Blastoise, its predecessor? The answer is in the population and the desirability. You see, Blastoise has a population of 317 PSA 10s. This is the unlimited variant, whereas Yanma has a population of 12. That means out of all the cards in the entire world, all of the set collectors looking at finishing first edition PSA 10 holo sets, people like myself, there's only 12 copies available. That means only 12 complete sets can exist out there. On the other hand, with Blastoise, there's 317 of them. Population is going to win out here. This is a matter of scarcity being more important than popularity. I think that's one of the factors that we need to take into consideration, especially if you're new to collecting, if you're listening to these other channels that are trying to overhype things or try to get you to buy into their motives of selling these starters or earlier cards. You need to pay attention to the pop report. It's not the only factor, but it is one of the factors that's going to influence the long-term outlook of a card moving forward. See, I mean, I'm just one example of somebody that's seeking Yanma in PSA 10 condition. There's going to be a lot of competition given that there's only a few copies out there. I've had to settle for a PSA 9. This is one of the cards that I've been looking at upgrading in my own personal collection for years. And when I say years, I'm talking like the better part of the decade, probably going back to 2014, maybe earlier. It's a difficult card to find, and those prices have only increased over time. So I know sometimes as a collector, we hold off making that purchase thinking the next one, or the next one, or once there's more that are graded in a PSA 10. But we're getting to the point where a lot of those low pop cards are not changing in population. More importantly, they're just not coming up for sale. And it's that opportunity cost that matters, because if you only have a card listed once every 3 years on eBay, that's your shot. That's your opportunity, and it's hard to put a price on that for every single collector out there. Patience has its price. Convenience has its price. And that's one of the things that we see with those low population cards that just simply aren't available out there on the market. Maybe one day I'll get to upgrade this Yanma, but for now, it's not looking too likely. This brings me to one of the main points, is understanding population is simply understanding supply. Supply and demand are the most basic concept in economics, and when it comes to the supply, less supply is going to yield greater demand. Here we have a first edition PSA 10 Feraligatr number 5. Now I picked this up years ago and the price was still low, but comparatively to the other holos in the set, it has always been one of the more expensive cards because of how difficult it is to find. That's population at work. That's availability at work. It actually has less population than the Lugia. Less than half even. This is one of the lowest pop cards in the entire world when it comes to set cards. It has a population of 18 currently. In fact, a PSA 10 first edition Feraligatr hasn't even gone up for sale on eBay in over 2 years. That's that opportunity cost at work. We've got other favorites like the first edition PSA 10 Umbreon from Neo Discovery. Now granted, this population's a little bit higher at 71, but that's still in just the double digits. Significantly low considering the hundreds of thousands of collectors out there in the world. One of my favorite Neo cards, probably one of my favorite cards ever. The moon in the background. It's really beautiful. I actually graded 3 of these in PSA 10 over the years, and this is my last remaining copy in my personal collection. Or you take a card like the first edition PSA 10 Light Arcanine, which I would argue is probably the most stunning card from the holos of Neo Destiny. With only a population of 62, that's going to be a notoriously difficult card to find, and with that difficulty comes price, comes value, comes long-term standing as a good investment. Now again, these are just some of the examples of low population PSA 10 cards, and the argument could be made that, well, those are PSA 10s. This isn't going to apply to lower grades, but in some situations it actually does, just to a lesser degree, since obviously there's going to be more availability on those PSA 9 variants. When we take a look at population though, the important thing to remember is that the less supply that's available, the greater demand that's going to be out there. And we can see this time and time and time again with cards across the board. In addition to understanding population, the total market available for a card, we need to understand what its current market availability is on e-commerce sites like eBay or Instagram. Because after all, if nobody is willing to sell the cards from their collection, then they're not really available, despite what the population might indicate. Right now, in PSA 9, there are only 4 copies of Typhlosion available on eBay, whereas with Charizard, again, the most iconic, the most popular Pokemon card in all of history, there's 138 copies available. Here we have the T17 first edition PSA 9. So obviously it's not a 10, and I've been trying so hard to grade one of these in a 10. You'll notice this is the old PSA logo. I probably submitted 4 or 5 back years ago, and I have another 6 of them at PSA right now. And I can tell you right now, none of them are going to grade a 10. This card is notorious for print lines, factory imperfections, and it's those little tiny flaws that'll drop the card instantly down to a PSA 9 or a PSA 8. But nevertheless, this card still demands quite a hefty premium in PSA 9. Once again, this is the basic principle of supply and demand at work. As economics would tell us, the greater the supply, the more it's able to meet demand. And for the case of Typhlosion 17 here, it's a very difficult card to grade in a 9 or a 10, and so the demand is out there, that there's just not enough supply to meet that demand, and that's one of the reasons why, even as a PSA 9, this card still retains a pretty hefty price tag. I believe the last one went for approximately $6,000 in a PWCC auction. As I mentioned earlier in the video, popularity is an important factor. It's just not the factor to consider. If we look at a couple examples from Neo Destiny, first edition PSA 10 Light Dragonite, a crowd favorite. Dragonite, a very popular Pokemon with a population of 85, outsells Light Azumarill with a population of 68. Despite having 17 additional copies in PSA 10, Dragonite still wins out in price by a large margin, and that's going to be because of its popularity. Obviously, Dragonite's a more iconic Pokemon, one that a lot of collectors are interested in, and so it's that demand that drives popularity. So when we break down the market into those factors, it's a mix of supply and demand. Population and availability are the supply side factors to take in consideration, and then popularity is the demand side. What we need to be careful of is that we don't capitalize in on just one of those two sides. If you look at cards that are solely fueled by popularity, but their population and their availability are out of control, that the supply is in abundance, that's a recipe for disaster. On the other hand, if a card doesn't have any natural interest, that's also not going to maximize its potential. It's a combination of those factors, and that's where scarcity comes in, is really more of a look at the supply side. So what we need to understand is that popularity isn't enough. Demand is only half the equation, supply is the other half, and some of the cards that are currently hitting the market, the common starters, Pikachus, Eevee from Jungle Set, Meowth from Jungle Set, Jigglypuff, these cards are actually incredibly common, and if we check the population report and check their availability, we'll see that there's some volatility behind those cards, that at any moment, that population report is bound to jump dramatically. For example, these Charmanders from the Shadowless set came in theme decks and booster packs. So really they had a number of different sources. And I actually just went into one box that I had some Shadowless bulk in storage, and I was able to find 40 or 50 Shadowless Charmanders. At any moment, these could be graded, put into the population report, circulated, and that's going to have an impact on prices and long-term value. So if you're safeguarding yourself, that's just one thing to consider, is you need to consider the scarcity. Scarcity and rarity and condition are all tied together. Again, if you want to see more about that, you can click on the link below for the video that I did on those factors. But again, scarcity is one of those factors that we can control to some degree by arming ourselves with education. There are tools out there like PSA's population report, PokemonPrice.com that'll show you how often, the frequency of sales, as well as what those populations are on a moving basis. At the end of the day, my thoughts are this. When it comes to value, whether it's long-term value or immediate value, scarcity wins. It's really a combination of supply and demand. Population and availability are the supply. How many total are there graded? And how many of those graded cards are available on the market right now? That's going to tell you what the supply is actually like, and the lower that supply is, the more competition there's going to be. Inversely, demand is also important. It is a factor that we need to take into consideration. What is the actual popularity of this Pokemon? How many other people are after this card? And if we can take those two together, we can kind of formulate our own pie chart. I like to think of those graph stats that were originally in the back of the catalog for the Pokemon games, where they had their different stat points mapped out, and the bigger the area, the more value, the more strength in battle that Pokemon had. I think the same is true with value, with price, with long-term sustainability. What's the population looking like? How many are available? And who wants it? Ultimately, price and value are determined by whatever somebody is willing to pay. And in my humble opinion, we should collect what we like, savor what we love, because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, and that's what value truly is. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I'm Pokemon Classics, and until next time, remember, the classics never go out of style.